Well, the words of the coroner can't be misunderstood. Death was preventable. Reb Tana, he died a shocking death on the eve of his 50th birthday. He was crushed in the cab of his giant forklift as he loaded a container ship at the port of Napier. Now, that was back in early 2006, and yet only now has the coroner ruled on his death. The port company bringing in the lawyers to try and show he was at fault. He was responsible for his own death. But Reb Tana's family, they were having none of that, and they fought to prove the negligence lay elsewhere. Here's Michael Holland in Napier.
It's going to be a special Christmas, this one, mate. Clearing you.
It's a conversation he's waited 3.5 years to have.
Cleared you. It's not your fault, mate.
A little brother to a fallen big brother.
He's here because of an unidentified hazard. Something waiting to happen. Something overlooked.
That's something overlooked. A weak section of wharf at the port of Napier. It crumbled under Reb Tana's forklift, forcing the machine to roll and crushing him in the cab.
Rep didn't make a mistake. He was doing his job, mate. He was doing his job. He didn't have to die.
His only bad move, agreeing to work an extra shift on that fateful night in March 2006.
Stuck his hand up. Yep, you're short. I'll come and cover. Yep, I'll come and cover.
Reb Tana's family say port bosses repaid that willingness by insisting he should have been driving a lighter forklift than he was on that particular part of the wharf.
He did the best he could do. He got killed and they turned around and blamed him. I think it's disgraceful.
They never ever took the blame off his head. They never ever took the blame off his head.
Compounding Phil Tana's anguish, the fact that he too was working the wharves that night and led the operation to release his brother's body.
And I got over there and I thought, whoa. I could see his arm. He had a little tattoo on his arm. I looked at it and I thought, no, he's gone. He's gone. And then I had to flick myself off. I've got to get him out. It was hard. It was hard.
There was much more to come, though. More to test him. A long fight.
A long fight, yeah. It shouldn't have been a fight. It should have been something that should have been sorted by the proper authorities.
Phil Tana says the port initially offered his brother's children $250,000 as an out-of-court settlement.
And this is when I started thinking, what's going on here? Do we really need an out-of-court settlement? Why do we need to go and settle out of court?
But when the Department of Labour announced it wouldn't be laying charges against the company, the family claims the compensation offer suddenly dropped to less than half the first amount.
That hurt. That hurt.
I think it's cynical, and I don't think we're finished yet until we recover the rest of that money.
In your mind, should the port company have been prosecuted?
In my mind, they should have been prosecuted.
For breach of safety?
Yes.
That simple?
That's simple.
Why wasn't it?
Osh didn't do the investigation properly.
A criticism shared by the Wellington coroner, who says he's surprised the port escaped prosecution, and further that the Labour Department failed to carry out an in-depth investigation.
They spoke to senior management, who all seemed to have repeated the story that the driver was at fault. The Labour Department concluded they couldn't prove a case, and so they didn't bring a case.
When Osh came back and said there wasn't to be a prosecution, what was the attitude of the port company then?
We haven't been prosecuted, so we're not at fault.
Concerned at the blackening of Reb Tana's reputation,
I think it was an insult to his integrity.
The family engaged a consulting engineer to show that part of the wharf was inherently unsafe.
There's no way that he could have foreseen it.
The weak point, a cast iron box containing the motor of an old bollard, covered by a steel plate.
It's fallen down, leaving this hole in the wharf deck. The wheel is then driven into the concrete at the end, and the momentum carries it over to here, then the weight brings it back, and it's still moving forward and bounce, 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 and then it starts to roll right over with the momentum and crashes there.
It's not just another death, it's the loss of a really great man who dedicated his life to doing a first-class job on this port. He'd work whatever hours were required, he wouldn't complain.
No sign of any recklessness or carelessness. He was driving conscientiously and properly.
Just want us to move on from this and say, hey, let's remember Reptana is making the Port of Napier the safest port in New Zealand. Get a phone call only this morning. It's hard. He's going to be a granddad for the first time. So what more would you ask for Christmas? Clear your brother? He's got a first grandchild on the way. I think he'd be happy. I think I'd get the nod to say, you've done all right. I think I'd get his approval. We did it, mate. We've come through.
Neither the Port of Napier nor the Department of Labour wanted to be interviewed on this one tonight. Now, the Port of Napier, they dispute the family's claim they were originally offered $250,000 compensation, but they do accept the accident was preventable and they're not going to contest those coroner's findings. As for the Department of Labour, they say the decision not to prosecute in the first place was made after taking legal advice. As for Reptana's family, they're yet to decide whether they will take any further action.